Welcome back to the Early Weigh-In Podcast. This week we're here to break down UFC Vegas 69. Fight night headlined by what very well could be here a number one contender fight for the belt. We got Jessica Andrade stepping in on a week notice here to take on the rising prospect and Erin Blanchfield. And man, fully convinced here all these UFOs being shot down, these train derailments, complete distraction here to keep us from this absolute banger of a co-main event that we got between Zac Pauga and Jordan Wright. Total of 11 fights for us this Saturday. Fight night getting quite a bit of the criticism online, but, to be honest, one of the first times I'm like, it absolutely should. Kind of an embarrassing showing for the UFC, but oftentimes these lower level fights do produce a lot of violence. Maybe tread lightly money line wise, but I think there is some spots, man, that we could make some money here on Saturday. We're coming off a UFC 284 fight between Islam and Volk, I think the scorecards were 100% correct, but, yet again, Volk pretty much proved to everybody that he's 100% in that conversation for pound number one. There wasn't as much violence as we wanted on that pay-per-view, though. The 30-27 scorecard for Elvis Brenner to start the night was pretty much just like what I knew was coming for the rest of the night. We ended up giving back all the profit that we had taken home the week before.
Yeah, it was not a good night for us. And like you said, Volk proved me wrong completely. I thought Islam was going to walk through him, and just making it close, I think it was a moral victory for Volk. We'll take a look at your card first. I think Yair being your best play of the night, got him at minus 160, ended up showing up in that fight against Josh Emmett. There was one sketchy moment where he had gotten clipped, but I think that he was controlling the stand-up for the majority of it and then finished it off with a submission. He ended up profiting 1.25 off of that one. Then you also had a big 2-unit parlay with Islam Makhachev and Khusein Rodriguez. Makhachev definitely closer than you'd like for a 4-1 favorite, but ultimately solid parlay and ended up cashing that for another 1.5 units. I think the most disappointing one was probably the Malarkey versus Prado fight, under 2.5 rounds. It seemed to be the mush bet of the week, ended up performing like the mush bet of the week, where it was just
never even really close.
Never even really close. Yeah, it was just kind of one where you knew as it started that it was going to the judges' scorecards. You ended up clearing up the card with not too much of a loss. You minus 2.27. Definitely something that you can come back from. But like you said, it sucks giving up the profit we had just made. Moving on to my card, a few more misses on this one. Both my money lines that I hit were 2 underdogs. Neither of them performed really what I was hoping that they would. Thankfully, I hedged on the Parker Porter one with Tafa by KO, but that was about all the good things I could say about the card. I think maybe the one that I'm most upset about is I tried to play Kulabau by decision at plus 220 when I should have just laid the money line. I'd been talking about playing him all week, and I just couldn't pull the trigger and ended up hurting myself even more just trying to pick the outcome of the fight. I ended up the night minus 5.36, and definitely looking to get the ball back on track because this was a tough one last week. Our main event is in the women's flyweight division between Erin Blanchfield and Jessica Andrade. And I know the card, getting a lot of flack, but I am actually kind of excited for this fight. Erin Blanchfield has the opportunity to kind of prove she's the real deal, stepping up against a true veteran of the division. And Andrade has the opportunity to stop this hype train, Initially, I saw this fight as an easy win for Andrade. She's got 3 times the experience, better stand-up, more power, proven 5-round cardio. But after watching tape, I am pretty worried that this is a bad stylistic matchup for her. Erin averaging 4 takedowns per 15 minutes in the UFC, and I imagine she's not changing up that game plan for this fight. Jessica, she's had a mixed bag of results with wins and losses against grapplers in her career, with her most recent loss to a grappler coming to Valentina Shevchenko, who, was able to engage with the grappling over and over with the same types of takedowns that Blanchfield also likes to use, the body lock takedown, the trips. And, as the fight went on in the Andrade Shevchenko fight, it was frustrating how little resistance Andrade had to offer by the end of the fight, where she ultimately ended up letting Valentina get to a crucifix position and finishing it. And it sucks that it's the same crucifix position we saw in the Molly McCann fight, just the fight before last for Erin Blanchfield. All that being said, Andrade has done a great job since that loss to Shevchenko, getting her career right back on track with 3 straight wins, and 2 of those wins over primary grapplers in Cynthia Calvillo and Lauren Murphy. I think one of the biggest things in this fight for me is how Erin handles the early pressure from Andrade. Is she on her back foot? Does she look to engage in the clinch? As I've noticed in the past fights that Andrade has had with grapplers, if she can get them on the back foot, she can almost overwhelm them with the pressure, the early offensive pressure. But it's when fighters throw in the level changes, choose to stand their ground by initiating the clinch, when Andrade tries to move inside to land her hooks, that's when you can start getting in close where you need to and landing the takedowns on Andrade. Being that Erin's only 23 years old, this is a huge step up in competition, and it makes it difficult for me to trust her in this spot. Plus, if you wanted that good plus money ticket, it has kind of gone and passed. I do think that this is an excellent spot for her to prove that she belongs in title shot conversations, especially with the landscape of the women's flyweight division. But I'm just not sure. I think that the clearest path to victory is for Erin Blanchfield here. It's mapped out, but this is such a big step up in competition that I'm not going to be surprised if Andrade goes out there and starches her.
It's a tricky one for Erin because, with the original matchup in Santos, I was like, she's 100% getting a title shot if she walks through Santos. Valentina's fighting in like 3 weeks. But with this one, I still think the title shot's on the line for her, but it's a completely different stylistic approach. In Taila Santos, someone who's a grappler first, this is 100% striker that she's got in front of her, and someone with much more experience like you talked about. But on Erin's side, I think her game plan and her stylistic advantages opened up a whole lot more for her in this fight at the same time. I was almost kind of willing to back Santos up against Erin because I thought she was just a more physical version of Erin, but now like you talked about, you watch Valentina initiate the clinch and trip her down. While you're watching tape on Blanchfield, you watch her just clinch up with Miranda Maverick, trip her down over and over again. And it's like, yeah, man, there 100% could be a path for Erin to make it look easy. And when she gets you down on top, she's heavy and she's got phenomenal jiu-jitsu that she's been training since she was a little girl. 23 years old, coming off beating Molly McCann in MSG. For her age, she's already fought some damn good competition, and I think at 23, you're just going to see improvements like at a significant rate between her fights, training at a good gym at her age. Going to be a problem for division, for the division for a long time. Might not touch gold if Valentina's there. Maybe she does, but I think this girl 100% is fighting for gold at one point. I've been pretty high on her for a while. But, you watch the J.J. Aldrich round 1, and it does give you a little bit of pause for concern. She's getting outpointed by what I think is a taller, better distance striker, a southpaw, a little bit different of approach than what she's going to see from Andrade. Andrade, I don't think is as technical of a striker, but definitely offers a difference in the power and the willingness to throw 5 and 6 punches behind it. And you talked about, man, 5-round experience, fought for a belt, held a belt. And I personally think flyweight is her weight class. She's too small for bantamweight, and I think she's only 31, but she's well into her MMA career, and I think the weight cut to 115 is going to get a little bit harder for her. She's 3-1 at this weight class. She's finished Chuk and Calvillo, and the Murphy fight could have very easily been stopped. She could have finished all 3 of these wins here. There's not really a girl that I can think of that has that stopping power of hers. She's like a mini John Lineker out there, good cardio, walks forward. It's a big question, man, if this is just too soon for Erin Blanchfield. And part of me says yes, and the part of me was like, there was a plus 140 out there with a clear path to victory, and I probably should have jumped on it early. Striker versus grappler, and I tend to lean toward that grappler, especially when it's plus money. So I am going to stay on the Blanchfield side as I have all week, missing the line. No, I'm not going to have anything tracked, but she's officially going to be the pick man to upset us. Our co-main event takes place at light heavyweight, where we see Zac Pauga taking on Jordan Wright. And, to be honest, I can't think of a worse co-main event the UFC has ever put on. When we talk about your fight of the night, it's flat out criminal that a guy like holding the record for the most UFC walks is on the prelims and is not your co-main event here on a card of this caliber. Bringing Jordan back up to 205. The guy's on a 3-fight losing streak. He's been finished in all 3 of those, and it just seems like the UFC is doing everything they can to get Zac Pauga back on track. The guy who was the front runner to win tough comes in at like the minus 200 favorite to Mo Usman. Largely looked as the big favorite throughout the whole season and got slept, man, bad. He's now coming back to 205, where he fought all of his career wins previously before tough. The guy trains out of Team Elevation and cardio. You see him being main sparring and training partners with Devin Clark, Curtis Blades. The guy's got good boxing. He likes to keep things tight and Pretty sure he played football and rugby. He's pretty athletic, moves well. But I am a bit concerned that speed advantage he had on tough is just not really going to translate down to these light heavyweights. He does have all the tools to win this fight, but going forward at 34 years old, the time pretty much has to be right now if Zac's going to get anything done. Jordan having great size for middleweight, I think coming up to light heavyweight here, I talked about Zac having that speed advantage over those heavyweights. I think he could have a big speed disadvantage in this fight with Jordan. Jordan's already throwing ridiculously unorthodox strikes, spinning wheel kicks right off the bat. But it is oftentimes to his detriment because everything's with so much energy. He has a gas tank of about 3 minutes. You add on the extra weight now, and I don't see him having a gas tank that lasts him outside of round one. The guy's got extremely poor striking defense with a bum chin to go with it. Just doesn't react well to get to shots at all. I always want to hit the under 1.5 in Jordan Wright fights, but I'm a bit of a reserve here with Pauga, man. He's coming off of a very bad TKO loss where he was slept as the big favorite. He's an even bigger favorite here, really needing a win to keep his roster spot. So I just don't want him to come out here a little tentative on the jump. You had Dusko Todorovic on a bit of a skid, came out a bit more tentative with Jordan Wright, and we saw it slip over the over 1.5 by about 45 seconds. So Pauga does have enough skills to be the pick here, but I think it's going to be the first time that I'm not fading on the other side of Jordan Wright here. What's your thoughts for the co-main?
So I'm with you. We definitely got screwed on name value for this co-main spot, but just knowing the Beverly Hills Ninja, I think entertainment value will far exceed the expectations of a co-main. Definitely a do or die moment for Jordan Wright here. 2-4 in the UFC, and like you said, he only knows one speed, and he's made himself a fan favorite by doing it. You talked about his last fight with Dusko. It wasn't that Dusko slowed it down. Jordan Wright just came out with a grappling to it in his game. He started to incorporate that, and it ended up gassing him out just as quickly, and also dealing a lot less damage by using a grappling attack. It didn't help with his gas tank at all, and I doubt that he's going to go back to it. It's just got to be like an adrenaline dump or something, because he can't help but swing as hard as he can whenever he's in there, or use all of his strength for takedowns or holding position. And the craziest part about him gassing in his last fight is that he spent the overwhelming majority of that first round in a dominant position on Dusko. It was just kind of comical that he couldn't even hold his hands up after the first minute of that second round. Zac Pauga, interesting matchup for Wright because he's not someone who's known for getting those quick finishes in his pro career, 4 out of 5 of them going to decision. Or 4 out of 5 of his wins going to decision. And usually he does a good job of slowing down that pace to kind of put that preferred speed on and just punch out, be able to out-volume his opponents. But I'm not sure he's going to have that option here. He's cutting for this fight in a weight class at light heavyweight where, yes, that's where he used to cut. From what I've seen on social media this week, it doesn't seem like it's going to be the easiest of weight cuts for him. But if he doesn't manage to make weight, I am expecting him to be the bigger guy on Saturday. And just like you said, the extra weight, it's only going to help accelerate the gas tank issues from Jordan Wright. I think the best thing Wright has going for him is the Pauga coming off that KO loss. Usually they are coming in with a little bit less confidence and a little more timidness to a gauge. I think if Wright wants to give himself a legitimate chance of winning this fight, he's going to have to revert back to his old ways, what got him into the dance. And he's going to look to jump on Pauga early. If he doesn't, I am fairly certain Pauga will use his size to drain the life out of him, and eventually Wright will look to shell up, look for a way out. Either way, I am expecting a finish. And like I said earlier, I do think that this co-main event does hold up for its entertainment value alone. For my fight of the night, I mean, I gave this card one good look over, and this was the no-brainer fight of the night right here. We have the veteran of all veterans and Jim Miller, who holds the record for most wins, most fights, and most sub attempts in the UFC, which I thought was a nice little fun fact. And always against the always exciting Alexander Hernandez, whose career, I think we can now safely say it's not gone the way that he had planned out coming into the UFC. Kind of reminds me of Kevin Lee's career, just a ton of obvious talent, just can't find a way to put it all together. Right now, Hernandez was riding back-to-back losses by second-round finish to Renato Moicano and Billy Q. Both of these due to his inability to pace himself during his fights. As we've seen in most of his fights, if he can't find that early finish, he ends up gassing out to the amount of muscle that he carries on his frame. This one being at 155 pounds is much better than him trying to kill himself to make featherweight. But I do think the issue is going to be the same if this goes past the second round. I think the most interesting part about this fight is that Jim Miller is also known as a fast starter himself, with all of his last 7 wins coming in the first or second round. This seems like 2 hammers meeting at the perfect moment. Jim Miller has put together 3 wins in a row now and is going to need to continue beating these fringe UFC level fighters to stay in, to keep his job at 39 years old. And I feel like if this fight was taking place just a few years ago, we would be looking at it as kind of leading an old lamb to slaughter against this young gun and Alexander Hernandez. But now it's kind of more of a make or break fight for Alexander Hernandez, who's kind of turned into this failed prospect of the division, which is why this is my fight of the night. And I think that we are in for a banger here.
Yeah, man. Extremely, extremely good fight. You talked about it. Record holder of most walks to the octagon at the ripe age of 39 years old, man. The guy's on a 3-fight win streak. Props to him finding a way to be on the right side of 3 of them now. And then on top of that, there was a good spell for 2017 to kind of like 2020, where it was like Jim Miller is a round 1 or bust fighter. If he doesn't get you in by round 1 sub, he's not going to win. And look at him now, his past 3 wins all in round 2. But you know what you get with Jim Miller at this point. It doesn't really seem to be adding new wrinkles to the game. He's a southpaw, nice little straight left. He was one of the first guys you kind of see to implement some calf kicks into his game, some slick little front chokes and stuff that he likes to have. But while Hernandez does have his red flags, I think this is a much tougher fight for Jim Miller originally had lined up than Mowgli Benitez, and you see it reflected in the line. Much younger, much more athletic, much higher finishing upside on Alexander Hernandez, who just turned 30 years old, man, but you're right, just has not lived up to the expectations of when you knock Benel Dariush out in under 2 minutes, He's now lost 4 of his last 6, with the only 2 wins coming to Chris Grutzmacher and Mike Breeden, which are very insignificant wins. And he's been stopped in 3 of those last 4 losses as well, with one of those just being 2 months ago, man, when he went searching for answers already down at 145. It's a young age to be moving, searching for weight classes. You hear him talk about almost wanting to retire already and find a new career. And then the Billy Q fight, man, I mean, he takes a whooping. He gets standing TKO'd in round 2. The eyes all swelled up, and I got to think he's not right back in the gym, for 3 or 4 weeks after that. I just don't think he's coming in here fully prepared either. So a ton of red flags for a minus 260. It almost does feel to me like a dogger pass, but I'm not really eager to lay money on a 40-year-old who I think's at a big disadvantage early on in this fight. Going to be a pass money line side for me. I'm going to lean with Alexander to get back on track here. For my fight of the night, we're going to go to the featherweight division, where we see Jamall Emmers taking on Khusein Askhabov. A fight taking a ton of action this week, on the betting lines. And if I'm going to be honest, it's on the exact opposite side of what I thought it would be when you're looking at paper. You see an undefeated Chechen-Russian fighter at 23-0, and usually that is where the money is pouring in, but not this week. It's going to be on Jamall Emmers here. Askhabov, the guy's 28 years old, training at American Top Team, Tiger Muay Thai. Looks like he has the ability to kind of put a full game plan together and mix things up. He throws hard hooks on the feet to close distance, massive hard leg kicks, and he's got some decent chain wrestling. I think the guy's got a couple different ways he can get this fight down to the mat. And when he does, he's pretty good ground and pound, nice submission attempt. The elephant in the room with the guy, though, is he's been inactive for 3 years, coming off a massive layoff due to some visa issues, and the last 4 fights he had as well were taking place at bantamweight. I don't think the guy's fought at featherweight since 2016, so there's a little bit to note there. With Jamall, he's already a big featherweight. He's long, he's rangy. Early on, the reach advantage could make it a little bit tricky, while Khusein's kind of knocking off some of that ring rust, trying to get his timing and range, but I do think he starts to find that timing, starts to land his shots on the inside, probably mixing a couple takedowns at the same time. Emmers, the guy's got really good UFC experience. He's fought a really tough slate of opponents. You look back on his record in 2016, Emmers is in a 5-round title bout in the RFA regional scene against Thiago Moises. And you go to Askhabov in 2016, and he's fighting a 5-3 fighter who's had 1 fight since. I do think on paper there you do look and see a lot of Jamall Emmers, but I think the people are I don't know, man. People are lining up to bet Jamall Emmers at plus 120, plus 130 when he opened up at plus 200. I just think the money's gone on him now. He's got very questionable fight IQ. I think his durability's questionable. The guy's been finishing 4 of his 6 losses and out of competition after Sabatini ripped his knee apart at 33 years old or something. I'm not going to be fading the undefeated Russian. I'm going to be willing to just like a small 1-unit shot on the 23-0 guy, man. You have any thoughts here?
No, I'm with you. I also think it seems like I'm with people in that the fact that Jamall Emmers is probably going to make this closer than the original odds opened up at. But I do think at this point it's kind of they've kind of beat it to death, and we're getting much better odds on, like you said, a 23-0 Russian, and it's hard to lay off. So I totally understand the pick. For my fighter to watch, I have chose Willie Nightmare, William Knight. It's pretty obvious why he's my fighter to watch this weekend. Apparently, he's going to be making light heavyweight after weighing in at 251 pounds for his last bout less than a year ago. I think this weight cut would be more believable if he hadn't shown us that he has the ability to royally botch his cuts in the past. Willie is actually a UFC record holder, nice, tied with Rafael Alves for the biggest weight miss in UFC history with 12 pounds. Yes, 12 pounds, almost an entire weight class in some cases. He's never been someone I've had a ton of faith in as a fighter in the past. I know the words raw and green have been used repeatedly in the past to describe his technique when we're breaking down his fight. And, judging by his Instagram, he's always come off as more of an athlete than anything. The majority of his training videos involve powerlifting, and it shows with the lack of technique he uses in an actual fight. Truthfully, up until his last 2 fights, he was doing a pretty good job with the tools that he had to get W's in the UFC fights. It's just at a certain point, if you continue to get these wins, the level of competition rises. And if you're not constantly improving your game, only relying on athleticism, the competition will catch up to you. Thankfully, the UFC has found another worthy opponent that might actually be bad enough to get Hulk smashed by this freak of nature, And I'm here to see it. So this is why he is my fighter to watch. I think you got to keep an eye out for old Willie Nightmare.
Man, that frame and physique, almost a circus act, man. He's absolutely a fighter to watch, and I would love to see him smash Proj now, Fighter to watch, opposite end of the spectrum. Let's head down to flyweight, man, where I'm going to take Clayton Carpenter, 26 years old, fighting out of the MMA lab in Arizona. He's coming off a win on Dana White Contender Series where he gets signed after a decision win where he fought one of Brandon Moreno's training partners who is an absolute massive flyweight and gave him a tough fight. A dude that I think is going to give him a harder fight than he's going to have on Saturday. He kept walking forward, man. The dude ate some good shots. He showed like the mentality and the willingness to not break that he showed at 26 is like head and shoulders above what Alex Hernandez is showing us at his age. I think there's real promise for this guy. I do. He's 6-0 as a pro. He's got a 6-1 amateur record with the one split decision loss coming to Junior Cortez, a guy that's also made his way to the Contender Series in the past. The guy's been in the gym since he's like a 10-year-old kid. He's got good leg kicks. The boxing, everything's kept tight. And he's got really good wrestling and good jiu-jitsu that I think is what's going to win him and take over this fight. And he's fighting Juan Camilo Ronderes. The only reason this guy is in the UFC and being rewarded another fight is because he took David Dvorak on 11 hours' notice. He's since been out, had a freak injury, and then also failed for cocaine use. And if you're John Jones, I might let it slide when you're the youngest UFC champion ever. But when you're a 4-0 fighter, it just shows me that probably your heart's just not all the way in it. And I think this is a tall price to pay for a debutant, probably laying, you do have to lay some minus 280s, minus 300 on Clayton Carpenter, but I think it's a very generous matchup for him. I think he's got a massive grappling advantage. I think he's going to win this fight by submission. It just seems to me as clearly a spot to build Clayton Carpenter up, a spot they like to showcase their young fighter to get that first finish on the very first fight of the night. So Clayton Carpenter's my guys to keep your eye on this week.
My underdog is Josh Parisian. Let me make it clear right off the bat, I'm not suggesting you place your hard-earned money on this fighter, but I think I can make a decent case as to how he can win this fight. First, and the most obvious reason is his size. Yeah. Parisian is a legitimate 265-pounder, always weighing in at the heavyweight limit. His opponent is a former middleweight turned light heavyweight and has now moved up to heavyweight for the first time in the last fight that he had, which happened to be his Contender Series bout against former welterweight Paulo Renato Jr., who only ended up weighing in at 220. This will absolutely be Pogue's first legitimate fight at heavyweight. Now, while I do think that Pogues will have a massive speed advantage, he is definitely going to need to mind his P's and Q's to avoid winding up on bottom against somebody in Josh Parisian, who has proven in the UFC that his best work is done in top position with his heavy ground and pound. Jamall is also someone who's been finished in all three of his losses on his record. Maybe one I end up staying away from entirely, but I do love that the path to victory is clear for Josh Parisian here, and if that number continues to climb, I'm okay with fading this unproven, probably not legitimate heavyweight here in this spot.
I don't necessarily hate it one bit. Jamall Pogues, going back and watching that Contender Series fight, it is less than impressive, man. It really is, and I think there's a lot of low-level heavyweights that could make this fight competitive with him. Underdog for me, I'm going to go with Erin Blanchfield, man. She's become a very, very popular underdog this week, so I don't know if I get around to tracking it. I don't necessarily like to be on that public underdog, but I think she's the highest level fighter on this card at plus money, because there's a lot of fighters that I just don't really think I'm looking to back with my money here. I don't think they're trustworthy. Erin, she's very green still. I think she's improving at 23, but I think you're going to see improvements at a very high rate. I think the ceiling for her is tremendous, and her ground game is just on another level than a lot of these girls. There is a chance that like I said, it's just too much too soon for Erin. I'm going to be holding my breath while the fight's on the feet, but I keep going back to there just 100% being a path to victory for her, and that's when you see how obvious that is. It really is hard to pass up at plus money. I really can't compare to Valentina because she's not as complete of a fighter, but Andrade has not fought very many opponents with the game plan that Erin is going to come into here. The last one kind of being Valentina, who goes 7 for 7 on takedowns in a fight that ends in the second round. And, Andrade seemed to me like she had that explosive power early to get back to her feet kind of untechnically, but eventually after she just kept getting taken down every minute of the fight, she pretty much kind of gave up to me, and I think Erin's top control is better than Valentina's. I think Erin has a much higher submission threat than Valentina does. So, man, a win for either girl wouldn't surprise me, but I'm way more inclined to lean plus money here in this main event.
My prop of the night is the under 2.5 rounds sitting at minus 125 for the Willie Nightmare versus Marcin Prachniow fight. I just think that this is it could turn into an absolute slop fest. Mm-hmm. Both of these guys are more than capable of doing that. But just looking down their careers, I know Marcin has shown the ability to get knocked out early. It's just until his last few that he's been able to stop that. But I do think that he still has the defensive holes standing up, that he could get cracked by somebody with as much power as William Knight. And then on the flip side, Marcin Prachniow, what he's shown in his last few, his striking has sharpened up a little bit. I do think that he's going to be significantly faster than Knight, and Knight has so many holes all around his game that I think that he's capable of getting taken down and finished, or just getting touched up on the feet. He eats shots like he takes damage well, but he doesn't react well. I don't know if that makes sense, but I don't really like it whenever he is in a bad situation. He usually just completely relies on athleticism, and I think that this is a fight that he could get into some trouble with it. So the under 2.5 at minus 125 with finishing upside on both guys is why I've picked this as my prop.
Fantastic line, by the way. It's now definitely gone up so much that it calls me to just take the whole fight, and fight doesn't go the distance on a book, so I'm hoping for some violence there as well. Sure. Prop for me, I'm going to go with another under. I'm going to take Jim Miller versus Alexander Hernandez, under 2.5 at minus 175. I think there's finishing both upside for both guys. Hernandez early, Jim a little bit later. In a fight we kind of already broke down, so I don't have to go too much in depth in. With Hernandez coming off that loss, like I said, to Billy Q, I can't imagine he's been training. I can't imagine, with the medical suspension he probably had, that he's just fully prepared for this fight. And I think he's even going to be more of a one-rounder bust here. But he is a motherfucker in round one, and I think there's a real good potential that he gets the almost 40-year-old Jim Miller out of here. But if he doesn't, I think we're going to see the same thing that we do in every single one of his fights that get out of round one. I think the guy's going to break, loses his mentality, his confidence. It all goes out the window in round one. And that's where Jim Miller is really going to start to take over this fight. 9 of the last 12 Jim Miller fights have hit the under. 5 of Alex's last 6 haven't even seen a third round. I really like the probability of one of these guys being finished on Saturday, man. So hopefully a good prop for you to cash.
For my best bet, I am taking the Jordan Wright versus Zac Pauga under 1.5. I think this is Wright's last chance to keep his job, and I imagine he's going to have to go back to what got him to the show, because that wrestling that he tried to pull in the last fight did not work at all. Wright's last fight was actually the first time in his entire career that went over the 1.5 round mark. And, I think that throws a lot of people off, but you just look at how that fight played out. It was best case scenario for Wright, and he still couldn't get but 30 seconds past the halfway mark of the second round. Not to mention, he was in fetal position at one point, long before the fight got called a few minutes later. And at minus 145, the odds are saying that this fight hits the under 1.5 less than 60% of the times. I'm just not buying that, man. So I ended up putting 2.25 units on it. I think that the under 1.5 in this fight played out 100 times, hits at minimum 75% of the time. And of course, there's going to be those times where Pauga is able to extend it past that 1.5 minute mark. But I think it's all on Jordan Wright, win or lose. He's going to do me the honors of cashing this ticket.
Absolutely, man. He knows to fight one way, and that's to hit an under at 1.5. Best bet for me, I'm going to go with Nazim Sadikov. Love having some closing line value on it. Love having you on the same side as my best bet as well. I got him at minus 162. Seen some money come on him. He comes from Serra-Longo, works alongside Aljo, Merab, Frivola, some of the better camp guys you can have in your corner. He did drop his pro debut, but now he's on a 6-fight win streak, and the Dana White contender showing was fantastic, man. The spinning back kick that he catches dude's kick, throws 15 seconds in, almost finishes him is phenomenal. Dominates round 1 with nasty top control, postures up with ground and pound, and then defends all these takedown attempts in round 2, and then in round 3 is able to find that finish with a nasty combo, sort of like Dan Hooker finished Gilbert Burns with just the same side hook to the body followed by it up top. Very clean, and not to mention he had the wits to him and the awareness to be listening to his corner, because he could hear Ray Longo telling him to start at the body. You could just hear it, and he listens to him, man, and finds the finish. So you like to see it. Master of sport in sambo. The guy can mix it up in wrestling. You see his nasty ground and pound. Walks you down, and a big factor that I think is going to be huge here is the way he throws to the body. Is Evan Elder is a tough SOB. You saw him fight Preston Parson up a weight class and take some good shots, man, for full 15 minutes. And I think he's going to be a hard guy to stop if you're just looking to put shots upstairs. When you take a good body shot, man, there's nobody tough enough to stay on the feet. I think the body shuts you down, and I think that's the way to finish Evan Elder here. I think he's got Evan covered, striking-wise, grappling-wise. Not a fan of laying chalk on a debuting fighter, but I do really, really like what I see in Sadikov here. So, going to be the best bet for the card on Saturday.
We start off our quick pick section of the night in the flyweight division, where we see Juan Camilo Ronderos taking on Clayton Carpenter. And I don't love the price tag on Carpenter, but I do think that this is a setup fight for him.
Yeah, Clayton Carpenter all day, man. I got him second round submission. Moving up to 170, going to go AJ Fletcher versus Thimba Garimbo. And I did almost make Thimba my underdog, because when you see a guy with a 10-inch reach advantage, a height advantage at plus 230, man, it is very tempting. On the other side, AJ Fletcher is gassed and burned us both in his first 2 fights. So I almost want to go to the well to him, but I do think AJ Fletcher is a much talented fighter. I'm going to pick AJ Fletcher, unfortunately.
I'll also go with AJ Fletcher there. We move up to the light heavyweight division, where we see Vince St. Preux taking on Felipe Lins. I like Felipe Lins here. It's low level enough that I'm not going to touch it, but I like Lins here.
Way low level enough not to touch it, but you talk about OSP's last fight with Shogun, and he looked bad, man. I'm going to go Felipe Lins as well. Jamall Emmers taking on Khusein Askhabov. You know how I stand about that one. Don't line up to fade the 23-0 guy. I'm taking Askhabov.
I don't know. I think I don't really know. I don't have enough. I do know that Jamall Emmers is going to make this tough, so I'll take him at plus money just for our first disagreement. And then moving down to the women's bantamweight division, Lena Landsberg taking on Mayra Bueno Silva. I don't have any faith in Bueno Silva. A lot of people do. She's sitting at minus 500. It looks like an apple pie shitter to me. I'll take Bueno Silva because Lena Landsberg is awful, but it would not surprise me in the least to see some big upset.
Heck yeah, man! You're talking about a woman who's moved up to bantamweight, and now she's over 80%.
Yeah.
It's a women's fight, man. I almost want to put a quarter unit on Landsberg, even though I
principle.
but I do think I'm going to side with Silva. Just don't touch that price tag. Naz Sadikov versus Evan Elder. Naz Sadikov. Let's go round 3 finish again.
Yeah, I hope that it is a finish. I don't want to sweat this one, but I'm also going Nazim here. Staying in the lightweight division, we go to Jim Miller, Alexander Hernandez. I'm leaning towards a Hernandez early finish. I just think that he does have one round of gas tank in him, but that one round might be enough to put away somebody like Jim Miller, who is aging and has kind of gotten off the hook with his last 3 opponents. I think this is a pretty big step up in what he can handle at this age right now.
Unfortunately, man, I'm gonna side with the same thing. I hope the under hits for my bets, but I'm gonna be Alexander Hernandez, unfortunately, too. William Knight versus Marcin Prochniel. Man, we're getting into low level stuff these next couple fights. Give me Thick Willie.
Oh man, oh man. I don't know. William, I don't know. Give me Marcin for this one just because, I don't think Willie's going to make 205. So if this fight happens, give me Marcin. Moving up to the heavyweight division, Josh Parisian versus Jamall Pogues. I'm going to go Parisian here. I think it's a 50-50 fight, and you got to pay juice to bet Jamall.
A lot of juice. Parisian's coming off the heart competitions, whatever, dropping out of a fight on fight day. I don't know, man. God help you if you're betting this fight. But I do think it's dog or pass, so unfortunately I'm going to side with Josh Parisian as well. Co-main event, Zac Pauga, Jordan Wright. I think you got the best bet with the under there. I'm on the under in a former fashion as well. I think Zac Pauga gets the win.
I'm going Jordan Wright here. I do hope that he keeps his job, and I do think that he could. He could capitalize on Zac Pauga here. I think he's going to sell out, and I'm happy that I'm at least going to get that from him. So I'm on the right side here. I'd love to see him stay in the UFC. Moving on to the main event, Jessica Andrade versus Erin Blanchfield. I was torn all week. I thought Andrade was the easy pick, and then after tape, it's like Blanchfield. I don't know. So I'll take. I think we're gonna side on the same way. I'll take Erin Blanchfield here. Just the clearer path to victory. Although this would be a huge step up for her.
Yeah, I'm gonna side with Erin Blanchfield as well to get the job done. I like a girl with a ground game at plus money. So she's gonna be the side as well to upset a few people and potentially get a title shot out of this one here. I appreciate you guys hanging out with us. We got 11 fights on this. This low-level card, man. But
hopefully it stays together.
That's what I'm saying. Hopefully it stays together, and hopefully there is some violence. So appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Make sure to like the video, sub to the channel. When you're done, let us know what your best bet of the week is. We'll see you next week.
Peace.